Roxy to our spoken word artist event. This is actually Women's History Month. So this was supposed to have been in person. I actually contracted with Roxanne a year ago before COVID really took form. We were in Florida, in Orlando, early March of 2020, and she was supposed to be on our campus, but instead she's with us virtually. And Roxana is an Iranian American spoken word poet, performer, and educator from New York City. Roxy has featured in spaces such as Madison Square Garden, Off Broadway, the United Nations, PBS, World Channel, and colleges nationwide. So welcome, Roxy.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I have my eye on the whatchamacallit, waiting room in case more people join. But thank you so much for having me. I was just practicing how to say Mount Wachusett right before you all arrived, just because I also went to school in Massachusetts, and before I went to school out there, I couldn't say Massachusetts. I used to say Massachusetts because it was so hard for me to say. So I'm so glad that I can now say Mount Wachusett Community College. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here virtually in Queens and be with you all in spirit. I am a spoken word artist here out in New York City. And outside of being a spoken word artist, I teach for an organization called Story 2. We're a storytelling company we do a lot of different work, but specifically we help high school students who are applying to college write their personal statements. And then we also help adults with storytelling skills in their careers and beyond, wherever their stories are taking them. And then outside of that, I teach for Hunter College for the Women's and Gender Studies Department. So I wear a lot of different hats, and you'll learn a lot more about me throughout the show, but I do want to go ahead and get started. And so the first piece that I'm going to do with you all today is a piece that I wrote when I was 16. And Kathy actually had made a special request that since it's Women's History Month, if I could focus on gender. And actually most of my shows focus on gender regardless of if it's Women's History Month. So we will talk a lot about gender, class, race, especially because my background in undergraduate and in my master's were both in gender. But when I was 16, I was really coming into my own skin. And it was when I first started really realizing that there were all these expectations placed on me, on my body. And everywhere I went, there were people telling me what I should wear, how I should be, if I was too opinionated, if I wasn't speaking enough, my hair was too this, my this was too that. And everybody had something to say about me. And I started to notice differences in different contexts, but similarities in those differences. And so this piece was a piece that I had written about myself trying to understand the differences and the similarities and how unjust they both were in the different contexts of my family, both not of my family, but of me being in the States. And then also when I would go to Iran and just noticing how society treated women no matter where I went. So this piece is called Seen Not Heard. We were at the movies, all ladies ranging from ages and sizes. We couldn't help that the film we had just watched was reflected in our eyes. And that's when he said it. Those words I wasn't expecting, that phrase that became infecting, injecting in my veins like I was the next virus. Move it along, ladies. Women are supposed to be seen, not heard. All 8 of us stopped. No yelling of obscene words, no flipping the bird, just silence. Like a child exposed to her first curse. Similar to a time with my cousins in Iran when a man told us, you too should be ashamed that your pants come above your ankles. How is it How is it that in a country where more women are enrolled in schools, the men have managed to change all the rules? Because under their chadors, my cousins wear Levi's jeans like they secretly hope for that American dream. We in America must not face sexism. But this man at the movies on 42nd Street would manage to shatter their idea of justice in one sentence, proving that sexism is alive everywhere and is relentless. Because in one country, I am being told to be seen, not heard, and in the other one, heard, not seen. If I could get them both in one room, I would scream that my grandmother was teaching education to children in Iran during a time when education was giving up on teaching. When she spoke, the class listened. And when she speaks, I listen like a poetic magician, teaching me how to create rice from a single grain, all while reciting her pain. She taught my mom, who with her education fled the revolution in Iran and adapted to America at the age of 16. They are seen in my eyes as heroes. They are heard in my ears as wisdom, just like the women that came before them, because with every notion of you blocking your ears, you're implying that the years put into fighting for women's rights was non-existent. That Joan of Arc was a cross-dresser who appeared crazy, that Marie Curie doesn't affect your current health and safety, that Zahir Ahmad, Maya Angelou, and Sylvia Plath are just poetic maybes, that Rosa Parks' action wasn't important because she was just a lady. But you're wrong, you see. These women have planted seeds deep in the earth's crust, and their tears of perseverance have caused hope to grow. And those wounds you inflict on women, those stitches Mother Nature will sew, so maybe next time. Think before speaking words that may in fact be the very ones that should never be heard. And if all this information is too much for one day, then I would love to call your mother up and have you hear what she has to say. Thank you. Thank you so much. I see the emoji. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that because it's really hard to do shows virtually. Thank you so much. As artists, we really like feed off your energy. So that piece was written when I was 16, and I don't know if anybody can relate, and feel free to let me know in the chat. When I was young, and even now, I mean, I think we're all still young, but when I was younger, I had a really hard time responding to shock. Like when things would happen that were painful or hurtful, I would stand still. And so when that man stopped in the movie theaters and in New York City and just told all of my friends, move it along, ladies, women are supposed to be seen, not heard. We really did all just stop. We just looked at him. And even my friends who always have something to say didn't say anything. We were all just like, who are you to say something to us? Like, all of us were daughters of immigrants who had been working so hard in high school, many of whom had gone off to become doctors. Like, I mean, not that that should matter, but like doctors, lawyers, teachers, like all of these things. And to think that this random person felt that they could just diminish everything that we were working towards. And so as I was going through life, that was really one of the moments that I think really shaped what I ended up studying when I ended up going to college. So as I was moving through the world, everything was sort of, I started noticing more and more that everyone always had an opinion on what women were doing. On our bodies, whether it was our bodies, our pay, our all of these sorts of things. And then I went into my first gender course, and I was sitting in my gender course, and my I'll never forget, my teacher made me watch a documentary called Tough Guys. And I'll put this in the chat just because I should have done this yesterday because I spelt it for everyone, but I should have put it in the chat. It's spelled like that. And there's a part 1 and a part 2. I make my students at Hunter watch this documentary even to this day. And it's all about toxic masculinity and the ways in which we raise our men. And as I was watching this, I started thinking about how unfair it is, the ways in which we raise men. Because up until this point in my life, I had been learning so much about the injustices that women were facing. And up until this point, I was still thinking of gender as sort of a binary concept. And so this was like my first introduction to not only gender as a non-binary concept, but also the injustices that men face. And I was thinking of particularly the confines of what it means to be a man today and how unfair it is that we don't allow men the room to feel their emotions the same way that we do for women. And so oftentimes at shows, I always tell the men, this next piece is for you, because I feel like you don't often get that kind of space to really feel your feelings. Like, I feel like there's always all these sayings, boys will be boys, or boys don't cry, boys pick up and do this and move on. And whereas when we're growing up, a lot of girls are encouraged to feel their feelings. And I know actually, Amy, you're studying child development. And so I'm sure you talk about this in your classes, and anyone studying psychology, you probably are talking about these sorts of things too. And so this next piece is really a piece about me sitting in this class and thinking about my best friend growing up. He was one of my closest friends from ages 12 to 17, and really reflecting on the first time that I saw him cry. And so the piece is called Boys Don't Cry. I know a boy who cried once. You told him, boys don't cry. Take it like a man. 'Cause boys don't cry, 'cause to cry would show the side that is beyond robot. And beyond robot is unknown, and we fear unknown, so his eyes stay dry. 'Cause to cry would show the side that is beyond robot. And beyond robot is unknown, so his eyes stay dry, 'cause to cry would crack the pride in his father's walk, which technically already cracked, but he refuses to use a cane. Taught his son at a young age to wave hello to G.I. Joes and goodbye to G.I. Janes, who were both never really seen as Barbie dolls in men's clothes, but warriors in army turf. At age 7, he was jumping on couches, shooting at imaginary souls, forcing hypothetical holes into make-believe skin, all while wearing a sadistic grin. At age 7, I was playing house and teacher while he was playing cops and robbers, and his father bought him his first toy gun. Was told, when life's problems get too difficult, here's what you do, son. BB gun bullets will do the trick. Knives and swords, take your pick. But this is for you, and tears are for them. That emotional shield only brings you to the forefront of tears, and men don't cry. So take this gun and wipe away your fears, because men can never be vulnerable. And you're almost a man now. So you need to learn that crying is really another word for coward, and coward is really another word for boys who never grew into their skin. So you cannot let tears prevent you from going into your limbs, because if you cry, you will never fit in. But I know a boy who cried once, and each tear in his eyes symbolized an ounce of respect lost from his pupils and added onto mine till they slipped from the face. He told me that he would now be his family's disgrace, and I told him There is nothing wrong with showing some emotion. Your tears rebel against society's demand, and there is more honor in that than obeying an oppressing command. He told me that I was the only girl who could ever make him cry. And in that, I found some enigmatic pride because it meant that I was the only person that made him feel human on the outside, because in my eyes, it was never his peach fuzz, his voice, or the height of his stance, but his tears that indicated him becoming a man. Thank you all. So that piece was yeah, thank you. I see Kathy is yes, definitely watch it. Definitely watch it. I highly recommend those two films. The second one is specifically about school shootings and just mass shootings, and how we often talk about shootings without talking about toxic masculinity, and we'll talk about it as like the shooter, but we won't talk about it as like the white male shooter. It's very powerful, very, very powerful. I highly recommend both movies. But thank you so much for listening to that piece. I wrote that in my first gender course in college, and I had lost contact with that friend, and at the age of 18. And then at the age of 30, we found each other again. And I let him know, I was like, hey, I do this poem. It's about you. No big deal. And he was so touched. And one of the first things he said was, so have I been your muse all these years? And I was like, no, let's not take it that far. Let's not compliment ourselves too much. But it was very interesting. And I'm sure a lot of you are having these discussions in your circles, but there's it really moved me on my post-college travels. Something that I ended up doing was going on a Thomas J. Watson Fellowship, which is a 1-year independent study that's funded by the Thomas J. Watson Fellowship, which is funded through IBM. And what I was looking at was activism and feminism that was happening all over the world, specifically in communities that were Muslim, that we often deemed were like women were oppressed, and looking at what were women doing in these countries. And so my brain is like all over the place connecting the dots. But as I was sort of moving through my gender classes, everything was sort of starting to connect for me in terms of what I wanted to look at. And I really wanted to look at how we treat each other differently based on genitalia, and how we really, how our experiences in life change just because of what we assume onto each other because of sex and gender. And so as I was traveling during my Watson travels, I was doing these workshops with young women. And I'll never forget, in Morocco, there was a young woman in one of my workshops. We were talking about the double standards. And she was saying, yeah, I have to be home before the sun goes down. So I have to be home by 6. My brother can come home at 2, 4 a.m. And then all the women in the workshop were like, same with me, same with me, same with me. And I don't have a brother. I'm the only child. But I was like, if I did, I'm sure it would be same with me. And so we were all talking about it. And something the girl said was, what my parents don't realize is that by having double standards, they are protecting me from the son that they're raising. And that was just one of the most powerful things I had ever heard. And as I was continuing through my travels, I consistently think about the different ways in which we raise our children based on both sex, but also gender, like the expectations of gender that we place on people. And so, with that said, I am going to take a cup of water. Does anybody have any questions while I'm taking my sip of water? You can unmute or write in the chat. I see that Kathy's cat has left us. Wonderful. I see some direct messages. Thank you so much for these. These are so sweet. Thank you. Awesome. Well, if there's no questions, I'll keep going. And I am going to actually, I will share a piece. So as I was thinking about the set that I wanted to do today, I know that there's a lot of heaviness going on in the world, and I tend to have a lot of heavy pieces, and I didn't want to do that to you all today because I just don't want to. I feel like I would rather, I know that there's a lot on our hearts, and there's been a lot of shootings, there's been a lot happening, and there's just a lot of hate going on. And so instead of doing a piece that I usually do about structural violence, specifically against women of color, I'm going to share a story with you all instead. As I mentioned, I'm also a storyteller. And this story is actually also about immigration, also about being in America. But I think it will be a little bit more uplifting than the poem that I usually do in my sets. And so specifically because I know that there is so much going on in communities of color right now, that I want to share a story for us to engage in conversation, but also I want to be cognizant that things are heavy right now. So at this point in my life, I was working 3 very demanding jobs, and Sundays were my only days off to put my feet up, to watch the New Girl. It was 2012. New Girl had just come out, for those of you that watch. And I love Winston. So I really wanted to watch Winston and Winston's relationship with his cat. And and so I am going to I come home and I put my feet up and I get a phone call. And it's my great uncle, who at this point in time is 86 years old. And he asks me, Roxana, what are you doing tomorrow? And I say, nothing, uncle, why? And he says, my best friend is visiting America for the first time, and it is his dream to see the Statue of Liberty. Is there any way that you can give him a tour? He doesn't speak English, he needs a translator, and he really wants to see New York City. And I say, okay, sure, what time? And he says, 8 a.m. And I say, oh my God, okay. And so I meet this man. He's 75 years old, but he speaks with these eager 5-year-old eyes. And everywhere we go, he is so excited, like just jumping up and down for joy at our magnets, at our sidewalk, like the gum on the sidewalk. At some point he's like, oh my God, look at your pigeons. And I'm like, oh my God, if you like our pigeons, just wait till you see our rats. You're gonna love New York City. This is gonna be the city for you. Like, you found your home. And he's just like going on and on. Oh my God, I love this place. I love this place. And everywhere we go, he's speaking in Farsi, because that's the language we speak in Iran. And he's telling me, you're so lucky you live here, you're so lucky you were born here, you're so lucky your family was able to immigrate here. And he's just like, I'm so lucky I got a tourist visa. Do you know how many years I've waited to just be able to see America? And he's telling me all these stories, and we're walking. And he's like, where's the Statue of Liberty? Where is it? I want to see it. And I say, okay, well, it's in Battery Park. We have to get on the train. Okay, let's go on the train. And he grabs my hand. We go on the train. And I say, okay, but it's not that simple. It's going to rain. So we have this phrase in Farsi. I don't know if we have any Farsi speakers here, but it's amanat. And it basically means that someone is your responsibility for the day. Like nothing, you are their protector. And it's like very poetic. And I was like, you are my amonat today, amonat manin, and I don't want anything to happen to you. So I don't want you to get sick. So he says, okay, we'll go very fast. Let's go. And he grabs me and we get to Battery Park. We arrive on this boat. The clouds are looming over us. There's this couple in these bright yellow ponchos. They're sitting in front of us. And he turns to me and he says in Farsi, Man ashaq Amrika shadam, which means I have fallen in love with America. And then he asks if he can take a photo because he wants to remember this moment for the rest of his life. And I say, yeah, sure, no problem. And he says, okay, but I want to practice my English. And I say, okay, no problem. And he leans into the couple in front of us and his body is rocking back and forth as if he's about to jump rope. And he's grinning so big. And all I hear is, excuse me. And there's no response. And then I hear it again. Excuse me. And there's no response. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, you know, maybe they just didn't hear him. Maybe they didn't understand him. So I chime in with my American tongue and I say, excuse me, sir, do you mind, really quickly? And before I can finish my sentence, the woman twitches her arm and the man grabs her elbow and in a stern Midwestern accent warns her, don't help them. The sadness that takes over my body is deafening. My heart is somehow both shattered and numb, all in the same moment. And at this point, it's raining, which is ironically very convenient for me because it helps me in successfully hiding that tears are streaming from my face. And all I keep thinking is that up until this moment, I have translated everything for this man. Everything, the signs, every interaction. And I don't know how to translate this moment to this man who has gone on and on about how he is in love with America. And I don't know how to tell him that the same America that he loves doesn't love him back. And he turns to me and he says, Roxana, what did they say? What did they say? And all he sees is the tear falling from my eyes, and he knows. Without me saying a single word, it was like hatred didn't need translation. And he puts his head down and he says, oh. And in Farsi, it's like, ah, ah. And he just puts his head down. And we sit in silence for what feels like hours, but really it must have just been 10 seconds. And then he looks up and he just says, okay, look, there it is, the Statue of Liberty. And I say, what? And he says, come, let's just take a selfie. And I didn't even know, one, that the word selfie had traveled to Iran in 2012, but that two, that a 75-year-old man knew it. So he goes, Bia, selfie begirim, let's just go, let's go. And he grabs my hand, we go to the other side of the boat to take this selfie. And another couple sees us and they walk over to us and they're like, do you guys need a hand with that? And before I can even say anything, he's already on it, like, yes, please, the photo, thank you. And then he motions with his hands if he can do the same for them. And without him using language, they understood him. It was like love didn't need translation. And as he's taking their photo, he turns to me and he says, you mustn't let people like that get to you. There is still beauty in this world. Thank you all for listening. I'm glad I didn't cry today. I shared that story yesterday and I cried because my great uncle actually recently passed away. So it's harder to share this story of his best friend visiting. But I share this story because I know that it's not unique to me, and I know that it's not unique to my uncle's best friend visiting. And I know that there's a lot going on and that our hearts are heavy a lot between, I mean, just, I don't even want to list all the things going on, but I hope that this story can help us carry on, that there is still beauty and that sometimes we are the beauty, sometimes we are the light. If there are any comments or questions people have, feel free to unmute or write in the chat. I know it's not like I know it's virtual, so it's harder to create community.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Your uncle's friend still visit America?
I think that the way that the visa worked, the tourist visa, I think it's like a one-time visit.
Okay.
But I know that he still was asking about me. Because every time I would talk to my uncle, he would be like, oh, he asked about you. And I'll always be like, oh, say hello, say hello.
So sweet. Sorry to hear about your uncle too, by the way.
Yeah, it's been a rough year for a lot of us. Thank you though, thank you. I wonder if he'll be able to revisit. Yeah. All right. Do we have any writers with us here? Any poets? Anybody also write? I see a smile. Brittany, do you write? No. Are you a closet writer? Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all for that. All right. So I'm trying to think what to do. I have a few more pieces, and I also know that I want to keep some time for Q&A. So what I'll do is I'll go into my UN poem. It was mentioned that I had performed at the UN. And for this one, I'll have the words up just because I haven't performed this one as often, and I'm afraid I'll mess up. But I was recently called to do a piece in 2018 at the UN during the General Assembly. And this is, it was during a side event during the General Assembly. And basically they were doing a study about the impact of young people doing activism around the world and how oftentimes young people are deemed the problem. And as you know, from what I shared earlier, I've been writing and performing since I was 16. So I've been involved with activism at a very young age. I was very involved in talking about social issues and wanting to see change. And so when I heard about this project, I was very interested right off the bat. And then also having done my work on my Watson, where I was looking at how we other others and what gets justified when we call someone uncivilized or violent, quote unquote. And then what kind of things we can justify, like war or stop and frisk laws or imperialism when you other someone or criminalize someone. And so instantly I was drawn to their study, and what they wanted me to do was take this 300-page study and make a poem that summarized the study, which was not an easy task, I have to say. But I took it on, and then I had to perform the piece in front of all the people at the UN in their suits. And there's actually footage of this online. You can see it. You'll see me shaking during it. And I'm gonna perform this piece for you all. But it's really important to me because I feel like I know that many of the people that are here today are students, and I feel like we often forget how much our voices can and do matter. And one of the most incredible things about this study was that what they counted as a young person was people under the age of 36. Which I had never thought about, because at this point I'm in my 30s and I was like, I'm no longer young. And I was like, oh, I'm so young. I love this study. This is a great study. I'm going to put this right above my mirror every time. But it's great in terms of, like, oftentimes we put so much on our young people and we're like, oh, they're the next generation, but then we don't actually listen to them. And so this piece is really for our young people and for the amazing, incredible change that I've witnessed personally and that I read in that study. Okay, I'm just gonna drink water because this piece takes a lot out of me. There are 1.8 billion young people in the world. That's 1.8 billion understandings of conflict, 1.8 billion advances towards peace. Yet we all still live like we have this planet on lease, like we're not interwoven with future generations, like our wars were never something our youth were born into, foregoing that oppressive systems are inherited. Hand-me-downs of an othering narrative, pigeonholing our youth born into conflict, naming him savage, uncivilized, violent, naming her victim, oppressed, silent, naming them non-compliant. As if one general brush is vibrant enough to capture an entire generation without bias, as if this framework isn't already rooted in violence. Exclusion is still exclusion, even when it's done in silence. Our youth are demanding your alliance, born and bred into systematic hate. Yet so many young people continue to create change makers, peace builders, leaders of glory. So why is it that we rarely hear these stories? I know a young woman who created a soccer team in a town where girls are forbidden to play. We call them helpless. Heard of young people launching apps to make civilians feel safe. We call them violent. Seen young people educating others on power, conflict, and rape. We call them silent. Read of youth feeding 12,000 families. We call them savages. No women leading revolutions, revising educational institutions, all while tackling white supremacy at its roots. No young people organizing systematic reboots, seen youth reduce violence while organizing their communities to have their basic needs met. Living as examples, despite facing systemic violence as a daily threat. We call them dreamers. These are active civic engagement leaders in their communities. So why don't we hear these stories? Instead, we hear violent, we hear oppressed, we hear savages, and then we policy panic our ways into initiatives that benefit from these narratives. How can we continue to create policies without hearing from the people that they affect? Superimpose views without gathering intellect. Don't patronize our youth for losing faith in systems that were never intended to protect them. This is more than number counts on your desk ends. These are young people's lives. If they can die for their countries, they should be able to fight alive. Exclusion is still exclusion, even when it's done in silence. How we frame these problems plays a huge part in this violence. We have civic citizens actively working towards conflict cease. It's about time we stop treating our young people like the problem, as opposed to partners for peace. All right, so the funny part about this piece is, thank you all for the claps. The funny part about the piece is that I am a former ex-shy person, which is something I forgot to say at the beginning of the show. In high school, I never raised my hand. I never believed in myself. I was super, super scared all the time. And my teachers were the ones that signed me up for my first poetry slam. They're the ones that connected me with Urban Word NYC, which is the organization that really took me in and cultivated me. But I say this because I have severe anxiety, and a lot of people don't know this about me. And so when you see the performance at the UN, the funniest part is that when I walk off the stage, I have no idea that there's a standing ovation happening. because I'm so in my anxiety. I'm like shaking and nervous, and I'm like leaving, and I'm like, okay, I did it, I'm done. And then all these people in suits are standing up, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I just like want to crawl into my skin. But I share this because if anyone struggles with mental health or also is an anxious person, I just want to say, like, if you have something that you think you want to share, I have this rule. I call it my 3-minute rule, and it's helped me since I was 16. I tell myself that what I want to talk about is more important. The issue is more important than my fear for 3 minutes. And that little like mind switch is what has helped me do what I'm doing now with you all virtually as I play with my ring underneath underneath the table. Oh, cool, you found an article. There we go. More anxiety. There you go. You can tell I'm nervous writing that photo. Like, but yeah, it's so funny because nobody really knows that about me. It's something only really close friends know. But I'm starting to share it in shows because I realize it's what makes us all human. If I have anxiety, it means other people have anxiety, and why not talk about it? But thank you all for listening and hearing that piece. I hope that it inspires you to use your voice more on whatever issues that matter to you. Because I think one of the things that study talked about was that just young people are so powerful and are doing such incredible work, and that we should listen to them more. Has it become easier to perform? Yes, definitely. If you, there's a clip of me performing Seen Not Heard at 16. And if you look at how I walk off stage at 16 versus how I walk off stage in my 30s, I'm a lot more graceful now. I used to run off stage. My father used to always critique. He used to be like, "You're great, Roxana, you're great. You just have to work on leaving." You're always leaving so fast. And I didn't know that was anxiety until now, but it is. It's my anxiety that's like, all right, I did it, bye. But yeah, so, but if you ever want to see the progression of my anxiety, just look at how I left at the UN and how I left at 16 at Seen Not Heard. It's all online.
I wanted to speak to that. I'm the college mental health counselor on campus, and
therapy.
That's very encouraging because so often when I am working with a student with anxiety, I'm asking them to do a really hard thing, which is exposing themselves to that anxiety and practicing facing that. And so it's you share a great example that I will be using with my students. That's
awesome. Yes. If you ever, this is a weird plug, but I will actually put it in the chat. Now, let me see, workbook. 1 second. I work with, it's weird, this has never come up in a show, but I'm going to put this in the chat. I created a workbook with Now NYC for survivors of gender-based violence and sexual assault. And basically we do these workshops with survivors, and we created a workbook. In the workbook, the reason I'm sharing it, I put my 3-minute rule because we're helping survivors who want to share their story overcome their anxiety. So there's this whole section in the workbook that I wrote about how I overcame my anxiety to share, to talk about social justice. So if it's ever helpful, you can use the text from there. And the way I wrote it was not about gender or sexual assault or anything. It was about just generally talking about social justice.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, cool.
So Roxy, I think that's so important too, that we had a speaker back, actually it was the beginning of the semester, and what he talked about is authentic leadership, and that we really need to be willing to admit that we're not perfect and that we all have our shortcomings or different things that we try to hide sometimes, and that we shouldn't hide them. We need to be real with people. So that was really great that you were able to share about your anxiety and show us that, yeah, you're a performer, but you're just like us.
Yeah. And it's so funny because in the workbook, I say that there's like let me see the page. There's like a whole page where I give tips on performances. And I say, okay, on page 33, I say, like, I give tips on performing, and I tell people just embrace your anxiety. Keep in mind that it's literally there to tell you care. Like you care about what you're talking about. And no matter, like, there are people who are super, super famous and they still get anxious, and it just means you care. But yeah, if anyone, like that last part of the workbook will support you, like no matter what, like no matter where you might want to perform and about what topic. They're just general performance support, talking support. But yeah, awesome. Whew. All right. So I think I will do one last piece and then we'll open it up to questions. Does that sound good to everyone? So, because it sounds like we already started talking to one another. We can also continue this and then I can end it with a piece if that sounds better, since we're already talking. Does anybody else have any questions? Awesome. All right. Well, if no other questions, I'm just checking the chat to make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, I do have a question. What's your favorite poem that you've written? Ooh. So I didn't actually do one of the ones. I wouldn't say that it's my favorite, but I would say that it's one of the poems that helps me the most. And it's a poem about body image. That I wrote also when I was 16. I didn't do it tonight. It's called Beautiful. It's online. It's all about, like, it was a love poem to myself, but nobody knows that. But it really is about, like, when I was 16, there was a TV show called I Want a Famous Face. It really ages me now that I say that, but it was on MTV, and basically people would go on MTV and they would choose celebrities' body parts, and they would say, oh, I want Jessica's nose, just Jessica Simpson. I want Britney Spears's like ears, and I want Beyonce's butt. And then you would watch them go do plastic surgery. It was so damaging to like self-confidence. Like, I mean, they would talk about like the damaging parts too, but it didn't help. Like it really messed us up as a generation. And so as I was watching it, it really was affecting my body image. And so I wrote a piece called Beautiful that was about me owning my curves and me owning my body, and that like this was gonna be it for me. And if I was going to be heavier, I was going to be heavier. And if I lose weight, I lose weight. But this is me, and this is how I was meant to be. And one of the lines is, if you don't like it, get over yourself. I think it's not that it's my favorite piece, but it's the one that helps me the most when I get insecure, because it can still come up no matter what age. But thank you for that, Brittany, thank you. Awesome. What's the last line of that piece? I feel like the last line is, it'll come to me, but it's all about how, like, the reason I don't continue doing it is because I don't ever want to shame anyone that did have plastic surgery. So I don't do it as much anymore. Or when I do it, I give a disclaimer that, like, I wrote this when I was really young and insecure, and I don't want to shame anyone that did this because it made them feel good. So that's one of the reasons it's like not in the set anymore, but you can still see it online. And yeah, okay. So the last piece I'm gonna do is Flower. And This is a piece I wrote when somebody asked me, why don't you have any happy pieces? And also, why are you a poet? So this is my response to trying to write a happy piece, and also trying to like put into words what being a poet means to me, and what it can do for me, and how I view it. He wants to be a cowboy, and she, well, she wants to be a superstar. But I want to be a flower when I grow up, because flowers, they sacrifice their lives to make this world a better place. From creating the perfect first date to making a hopeless romantic believe that its petals will predict her fate. He loves me not. Like martyrs, gladly taking the pain while they wither dead. They sacrifice their stems for someone's I'm sorry that went too long unsaid, all while serving as the perfect bookmark for a love letter just read. They welcome babies from the womb, visit the dead at their tombs. They know just how to brighten up any room. Filling in our lungs with oxygen, we breathe in their death through cut stems placed in vases on the table, yet they don't complain because for one instance, their presence made our lives feel stable. They make that one line in the school play feel like you were the main act. Like those 3 minutes on stage, you had some sort of an impact. They make a mother feel appreciated, the pain of a patient in the hospital alleviated. They make the world that we are situated in feel a little more bearable. They make me want to be a little more shareable. They accomplish so much in their short lives. I want to live like a flower, give that much of me to people. They always love, never hate. They always give, never take, except for water and sunshine. So all I ask is that with time, I receive the two so that I can have the room to grow into a better flower, have my so that I can have the room to grow into a better flower, have my stems represent the difference I made before my time was up. Know that know that my presence was enough to spark action. But I don't have magical powers, and since I can't suddenly morph into a sunflower, I will settle for being a poet instead, eat bread in place of the sunset, because being a poet is the closest I can get to the star that harbors my wish. And my job as a poet is to find a hint of beauty within the tragedy. Search for the words capable of igniting hope that tomorrow is still worth living for, but I am not the weather woman. And I can't predict that after this sunshine, there won't be any more thunderstorms, but I can help you notice how the two created a rainbow in the puddle under your feet. I can help to plant my thoughts like seeds, hope that they don't grow into weeds, and trust for people to take this as my creed. So I will make myself vulnerable with my inner thoughts unfurled, and I will give my words like flower petals, hoping that I too can make a difference in this world. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. We have about 5 minutes for questions if anyone has any. I really appreciate you guys staying till the end. I'm gonna put my Instagram in the chat, and my I'm really bad at promoting myself, so I'm trying to get better. I think this is how bad I am, is that I don't know my own Facebook, but I think it's roxy.spokenword or something like that. But I definitely know my Instagram is that Roxy Speaks, though. So spoken word poet. Roxy Azari, spoken word poet. But if anybody has any questions, I would love to answer them. Anything? If not, thank you all. It's been so wonderful being here with you. Oh, I spelled my own